Hello everyone and welcome to another Pyro Gaming video. Your ordeal Nightfall from February 25th through March 2nd is going to be the Pyramidion. The modifiers in the 980 version of this Nightfall for this week are going to be Martyr, Exploder units have more health, Genesis algorithm, incoming void and environmental damage increased, Togetherness, base health regen is reduced, and you need to be near your teammates in order for health regen to be increased. Basically, stick together. You will also have Match Game, which is commonplace in the 980 Ordeal Nightfalls, and your champions for this Nightfall are going to be Barrier and Overload, and there are quite a few Overloads. In fact, this is one of those rare Nightfalls where there are more Overloads than there are Barrier champions. Let's talk about team composition. We went in as a Titan, Warlock, and Hunter. The Titan, played by yours truly, went in as a Bubble Defender. The Warlock went in with Well of Radiance, and the Hunter went in with Orpheus Rig, Tether on Top Tree. As for which exotic armor to use, I think that comes down to your preference. Orpheus Rig is great if you are running Tether. Something like Phoenix Protocol is going to be great if you are that Well of Radiance Warlock. If you are the Titan with the bubble, like I am, Helm of Saint 14 is never a bad option. Alternatively, you could run something like Doomfang Pauldron if you want to build more around an offensive super, or if you wanted to say build around something like Void Battery and your health regen on your Rally Barricade or Towering Barricade, then you can pair that with something like Crest of Alpha Lupi, and it'd be very useful in these master level Nightfalls. Some things to keep in mind here are going to be that you won't really need that Lunafaction or Rally Barricade reload unless you are going for an instant boss melt whenever you get to the final boss room. If you're not going for a spawn kill on him, then I would not worry about those. Those should not be priorities. What you should be building around is more long-term. This strike will take you a little bit longer, 15 to 17 minutes, give or take. If you skip some of the ads and just went strictly for the champions, you could probably get that down to like 13 minutes, somewhere in that range. But most of you expect, the 17 to 20 minute range, I would say, for an average player. Some of you might even take a little bit longer. This one is a long Nightfall, but I don't think it's particularly challenging. I think that the reason it's so long is because you have to kill everything in multiple sections to progress to the next part. Whereas most Nightfalls, you can just kill your champions to get your platinum rewards and go forward to the boss. Whereas this one, you still need to kill all those champions for your platinum rewards, but to unlock the next section, you need to kill all the other enemies too. You typically don't have to do that. Before we get into loadouts for you and your teammates, I want to stress one thing, and that is because of the modifiers in this Nightfall, with the Void and environmental damage doing increased damage, you really want to play distance. So things like snipers, things like scout rifles, pulse rifles with really good range. These are going to be your best friends. As far as shield types go, you will only encounter Void on the Minotaurs, and you will also encounter Arc in one room with the Harpies. No, I'm sorry, 2 rooms with the Harpies. You don't have to worry about Solar in this one, at least we didn't come across any. It was all Void and Arc. So keeping that in mind, you want to build your loadout around those 3 things. 1, distance. 2, anti-barrier and overload rounds on your weapons. And 3, arc and void shields. Now that being said, your ideal loadouts will be as follows. I was the one on my team that was in charge of anti-barrier champions, so my loadout was a Patron of Lost Causes kinetic scout rifle with full auto explosive rounds and an anti-barrier mod. I also ran a Void sniper rifle, the Persuader from the Vanguard, so that I could help with the Minotaur shields, and then for my power weapon, I ran Anarchy. If you aren't aware, Anarchy is insanely useful against barrier champions because you can tag a champion with an Anarchy round, and then while it begins to tick damage away, swap to a weapon that has anti-barrier rounds, in this case my Patron of Lost Causes, and anti-barrier rounds works with your Anarchy shot. You don't actually need to shoot your scout rifle, you just need to be holding it in your hands, and it's like you have an anti-barrier round mod on Anarchy. It's incredibly valuable in these Nightfalls. So that was my loadout. Now let's talk about my teammates' optimized loadout. Divinity not only deals arc damage for the arc shields that we have in this strike, but Divinity also creates a debuff that we can do more damage to a boss with, and as if that wasn't good enough reason to use it, it also has Disruption, which disrupts the Overload champions, which is what we have in this week's Nightfall. So keeping all that in mind, Divinity really is just the Swiss Army knife when it comes to the strike. So my buddy Alex was running Divinity, as well as a scout rifle that had anti-barrier rounds in his kinetic, and then for his power weapon, he was just running a arc machine gun to further help him tear down these arc shields. So really good loadout there. Speaking of that specific loadout, in this room you will encounter multiple overload champions, and they will rush you very, very quickly. So you can see there that we drop a well, and we go ahead and fire out a tether. That's to go ahead and get these small adds under control, as well as go ahead and start working on the overload champions. About the time this well runs out, we're still going to have some champions up, so that's where my bubble comes in. You want to go ahead and use your supers here, because these dudes are relentless. I think the overloads are worse than the unstoppables, but you know, that's just my opinion. So you want to try to get rid of these guys as quickly as possible. You can see how fast their health comes back. This is probably the most hectic part of this Nightfall this week, is this little transition right here. I guarantee you, if you're going to wipe, it's probably going to be here. But if you're able to get past this part, then you are more than likely golden. The boss fight is pretty relaxed if you play smart. The rest of these encounters with the champions are pretty relaxed. You can keep distance for the most part. This is the only one where you're going to have some shit right up in your face that you need to deal with very quickly. But again, like I said, as long as you're chaining your supers, you're making plenty of orbs, you got that well, you got that tether, you got that bubble, or whatever your class composition happens to be, just burn your supers here and take them out as quickly as you can, and you're going to be great. So on to my final teammate's loadout. He was running a Izanagi's Burden in his kinetic slot so that we could have some burst DPS if we need it. For his energy weapon, he was running a Void Recluse with overload rounds on it to help stagger in case we ran out of Divinity ammo. And then for his power weapon, he was also running an arc machine gun. I believe it was 21% Delirium, just to help out with arc shield. So again, we have each player being able to cover everything. That's very important. The only thing that each player could not cover was I had nothing for overload. But I'll be honest with you, we weren't expecting to go in here and having this many overload champions, because you typically don't. It's mostly barrier usually. But this week there are a lot of overloads. So having known that, I probably would have ran a Recluse instead of my Persuader as well. Although it is good to have a sniper for guys like this, you know, these hobgoblins and stuff that are off in the distance. For this room, I do have a recommendation for how to play it. If you start with the plate on the left that you see us go to in just a second, and then move to the plate that is bottom right, and then get the one that is up there closest to the portal very last, you will skip one of the Hydras. It makes it a little bit easier on you. You only have to deal with 2 waves of enemies as opposed to 3. You will have some overload champions in here, you will have some snipers in here, and you will have some arc shields in this room. But as long as you have created your loadout accordingly, none of that should be an issue. Now, one thing that I do want to mention real quick before we go forward is if you do not have these optimized weapons, things like Divinity, things like Recluse, things like Anarchy, there are plenty of alternatives. Anarchy is convenient, but it's not necessary. You see, what makes Anarchy good is swapping to a weapon that has anti-barrier rounds and it acting as if Anarchy has anti-barrier rounds. So if you're running just a Patron of Lost Causes with anti-barrier, you're going to get the same effect with Divinity, it's just going to take you a little bit longer. So in my case, if I didn't have Divinity, I probably would have ran something like a Void Hammerhead or an Arc 21% Delirium. So those are weapons that I feel like most people would have. If you don't have Recluse, or I'm sorry, if you don't have Divinity, then you can run Recluse for your disruption, and that will also cover Void for the Minotaurs and things like that. If you don't have a Recluse specifically, any Void submachine gun will work. Besides Recluse, anything that you can put a disruption mod on or an overload mod on that has Void damage or arc damage is going to be best. You want to optimize it as much as possible. You want to have as much packed into one weapon as you can. That's something that a lot of people, lose sight of. They end up running all this stuff that they don't need when they could have, 2 or 3 things packed into one. Like, that's why I say Divinity is so valuable in here, is because it has Arc, it has Disruption, and it also has the ability to make your teammates do more damage. That is 3 things in one weapon. Anarchy is doing 2 things. It's giving me Arc damage, and it is also helping me break the barrier shields. So it's doing 2 things. Recluse will give me void damage for the Minotaurs. It will give me disruption for the Disruptor champions. You get the idea. You want to try to pack as much into a single weapon as you can. So now that we have our loadouts and our subclasses optimized, let's go ahead and talk about the final 2 encounters of this strike, the room before the boss and the boss itself. So in the room right before the boss, which is what we're about to transition into, there's a couple of things that you want to prioritize. You're going to have a wanted enemy right there by the spire when you come in. Try to kill him, or at the very least, just piss him off so that he leaves. You will also have 2 snipers up top. You will want to prioritize them very quickly. They are orange bars, but one single sniper shot crit will take care of them relatively easily. You will have Cyclopses on the left and the right. Get rid of them very quickly because they do void damage, and remember, our modifier makes a void damage increase. Now, it's very important that in this room, more than the other rooms, you stick together as a team. Remember, we have that modifier that if we're too far apart, we have crappy health regeneration, right? Well, in this room, there is a ton of void splash damage from the goblins, from the champions, from the Cyclopses. I mean, it's everywhere. There's also a Hydra that spawns at the end, and he also does void damage. So there's a lot of it. You want your health to be regenning as much as possible, so try to stay together unless you are very confident, and then you can like stretch out on your own. What we did was take care of everything up in the top section by the first spire, get it scanned, and then we went underneath here. Once you get the first 2 spires scanned, then you can start working on the left and the right. The left and the right one will both have overload champions on it, so make sure that your overload champion person is ready to deal with them. This is another reason it's important to stay together, because if you're like me, I don't have anything for overload champion. So if I get caught out there by myself with no health regeneration and an overload champion is chasing me down, I'm gonna die, and that's pretty much all there is to it. So this room is all about taking things kind of slow, working as a team, and picking enemies off one by one. Once you have everything cleared and you have all of your spires scanned, I guess, start thinking about ammo. If you have special finisher on, if you have heavy finisher on, this is the time to go ahead and make the ammo that you're going to need for the boss for your teammates. So if you're running, say, Izanagi's, you want to make sure that you have all your special finishers coming off right now. You want to make sure that you're good. You also want to try to save your supers here so that you can use them for the boss fight. I feel like the boss fight is a little bit more hectic than this is, or at least it has the potential to be. These guys are easy enough to deal with if you play distance and if you play smart. So I'll talk to you guys at the boss fight after we get this cleared up. welcome back. Did you miss me? I missed you. So for the boss, Brachion is relatively easy to deal with. He does shoot void flames at you, and because of the modifiers, they hurt quite a bit. But the main thing to keep in mind here is if you're going for a spawn melt, you better make damn sure well that you get it. Because if you break his head off and he starts running around with the walls up, then you are screwed, my friend. He is gonna kill you. So what we like to do is try to get him down between half health and a third health. You don't really want to get too much below a third of his health in this opening section. So to use your abilities here is going to be really good. You can see that I put up the Towering Barricade while my teammate put up a Healing Rift. This is to counteract his Void Fire. His Void Fire will absolutely melt you in this Nightfall. But it's just all about, playing smart, taking out the enemies, getting the plates. Once you do 2 rounds of plates, meaning he'll be in this little box, then he'll teleport to the other box. Once he teleports back to mid, that's when we went for the melt. And it was pretty easy. By then, we all had our supers, we all had plenty of ammo because we hadn't been using it. We played it safe, we didn't have to worry about anything silly. If you aren't able to kill him when he goes to the middle, he will spawn a bunch of Arc Harpies that you will have to deal with, but if you kill him as soon as he goes to the middle, you don't have to deal with any Arc Shields. It's just, I think, 4 Void Minotaurs. So that makes things a lot easier. But that's going to bring this commentary to an end. Feel free to stick around and watch us kill Brachion, the Genesis Mind. He took his arm. And thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, click like. If you're new to the channel, click subscribe. If you're already subscribed, I fucking love you. Thank you guys so much for watching, and take care.